begin to, I'll just have a short introduction of Gerry Potter, who is a wonderful member of our cultural community who has won awards for his contributions to our cultural community. He taught for many years in the Department of Drama. He's taught at Grant MacEwan and at the University of Lethbridge. He's also been assisting in bargaining around issues of contract faculty. And he is in the process of making a film called Who Killed the Professor, that I personally find quite disturbing. But I do understand the value of the quip, Who Killed the Professor, because in fact that is what is happening in terms of the history of the work of the professor at the university, with increasing precarity and the undermining of tenure and the lack of resources for faculty at universities across the country and all through North America. So Gerry has founded theater companies, been artistic director, written many plays, and directed 7 films. So this is his baby.
Thank you, Dr. Janice. And thanks for inviting me here. It's a great chance for me to review the material. I've got a terrible cold, so if you can't hear me, tell me to talk more clearly and keep a distance from me, because it's contagious probably. That banner actually is from Contract Faculty Forward, which is a group of people's contract faculty in Ontario colleges who are trying to get more people into the union. AASUA is the name of the union, the Ontario Provincial Service Employees Union. It's a big, big union. Contract Faculty Forward is sponsored by it. It's just a small part of it. And they are on strike now, as of Sunday night at midnight. 12,000 people are on strike in Toronto. And I'll show you a clip later on from the bargaining team leader, J.B. Harnick, who's an amazing woman. This film, I taught for 27 years as a precarious contract academic in Alberta universities. This one, MacEwan and University of Lethbridge, on their Edmonton campus mostly, although I taught down south a few times. I got involved in activism after I'd been teaching here for about 7 or 8 years. I went, what the hell is going on? And we were just at that point bringing sessionals into the Faculty Association. It was 1997, I think. And I'd already been teaching for 7 or 8 years here. I became a sessional rep, and then we got our first contract. But just as that first contract was coming into force, or about to come into force, I quit. I got another job. I couldn't afford to do it anymore. And I had 3 small children. And one of the reasons I had gone into teaching was to give me a little more income stability. And it wasn't working out the way I had hoped. So I left. And then I got involved in bringing sessionals, advocating to bring sessionals into the Faculty Association at the University of Lethbridge, which was one of the last in Canada to bring sessionals or contract faculty or contingent faculty or adjuncts or whatever you want to call them. It's all precarious contract work. It's all short-term contract work, anywhere from a few months to 3 years. It's all precarious. That happened. We got in. We ended up getting some really bad contracts though after that, and there wasn't much sessional participation in the new sessional contract. And I just gave up on that faculty association. But I used to write them a letter every year or so saying, you really need to pay attention to sessional issues. And one year, they said, why don't you come down and be on the bargaining team? And I went, okay. They said, we'll bring you in as an observer. And I said, okay, but if I'm going to participate, I don't want to just be an observer. I want to be involved. I didn't know anything about bargaining at that point, not much. Although I'd run a theater company and been on the other side of the table doing some individual contracting. So I thought I did understand a little bit about negotiation. So I got involved there, and ended up the president resigned of that association, was there, and they had a spare spot on the lead team, the 3-person team, so I ended up on that. And I did most of the research, and I discovered the extent of the exploitation of precarious contract faculty throughout the industrialized world, right? And maybe the non-industrialized world too. I don't know enough about that. There's more research to be done. But certainly in Canada, the US, Mexico, the UK, and parts of continental Europe, there's been a huge growth, and that's why the title, Who Killed the Professor? The actual traditional professor job, that when I was an undergraduate, most of my teachers were, they were tenured or tenure track. 85% of them at my university were at least, probably more. Those ratios have pretty well been reversed in the industrialized world. In Mexico, it's now about 80% of the teachers are what they call in Mexico hourly professors. In the US, it's about 73 to 75%, depending on which study you pay attention to. In Canada, we don't know for sure. I suspect it's more than 50%. But in Canada, since Harper cut some of the Stats Canada information gathering, and since the university has been very reticent to give out information, we don't know for sure, but we suspect it's probably half or more. Certainly in MacEwan, where I teach, it's more than half, or where I've been teaching the last few years. I just quit, actually, so I can make this film. So, and I'm getting older, right? So I sort of said, okay, can I afford to stop doing this and make a film? And I thought I would actually get the film financed, but some of the finance didn't come through that I was hoping for. So it's become a kind of a pet project, but I couldn't do it while I was still teaching. There just wasn't time. I've had to travel. I've been to 5 provinces. I've interviewed over 50 people already, and I'm learning a lot, and I'm having a good time. And this piece is coming together. I've met some fascinating people. But there are big steps being taken. Tim and I are both going to a conference sponsored by CAUT, CAUT, Canadian Association of University Teachers in Toronto, this week. And CAUT has introduced a major study of what's going on, how many contract academics are there, what are their working conditions, etc. So that is about to happen. And the conference actually is about contract faculty issues. And Stats Canada supposedly is going back to doing more study and getting more information from the universities. But as Glenn Jones, the Dean of OISE in Toronto, Ontario Institute for Studies in Education, told me in an interview, he said, it's the issue. I said, why is it happening? Why allowed this to happen? And he said, well, it's been invisible in some ways. I don't think it wasn't invisible to me, but it's invisible to some people, and on some levels it is an invisible problem because students don't know that the people teaching them are subject to enormous stresses, and many are living close to the low-income cutoff line, right? They don't know, and the public doesn't know. So to some degree it is invisible. Anyway, that's my title. I wanted to grab people. It was going to be Who Killed Professor Plum at one point, but we figured there'd be copyright issues. I've had various names for it, Professor Precarious, etc. But anyway, that's it. What's the experience of precarity about? I'm making this film because I want to reach the public. Okay, it's not for scholars necessarily, although I hope scholars will pay attention too. It's for the public, right, and our students. And politicians, whoever else, right? Because we need them to know. We need it not to be an invisible issue. And film is not purely an intellectual medium, as you, I'm sure, are fully aware. So some of it's emotional. What's the experience? Like film is fairly good at, like theater, it's sharing experience.
Oh yeah, the job itself, I love the work. I love the students I work with, my co-workers, I love. What's frustrating though is not knowing if I'm going to be working again, if I'm going to be doing this for another 6 years, is this ever going to turn full-time? Depending on my contract, I may or may not have benefits.
You're trying to support a family.
I am. Yeah, and that's nothing I have to consider for my children. Is I have 3. They're all very young right now, so trying to put them in programs is sometimes difficult. Saving for their education. Sorry.
Precarity damages everybody. It creates huge stress, as you can see in that bit. Poverty, it creates actual poverty. Many contract faculty are actually below what we used to call the poverty line, what we call now the low income cutoff line, right? 23% in the US are on some form of public assistance, food stamps, Medicaid, these things. There's a professor in Denver who organizes other adjuncts to carpool to go to the food bank, right? And I have met people during the course of this film who use the food bank who are contract faculty. None of them would agree to be filmed for that because they internalize that shame. The cost is human, the cost is institutional to our institutions, and the cost is to our society and our students, right? It's going to affect the students when their professors are stressed in this way, right? Okay, and you can hide it all you want. Most of the people doing this kind of teaching are dynamite teachers, right? And doing it for well. They work hard at it, it's competitive. They're often more in touch with a lot of current things happening in their fields than the longer-term faculty, right? They're pretty great teachers, and some of them are great researchers too. Here's a bit of University of Alberta stuff. I got up at 4 one morning to ride to Cold Lake with one of your teachers, where she was teaching. They call them freeway flyers in the US. They're people in big centers like LA and New York and Chicago. We have them in Toronto too, of course, and Vancouver, who teach at one institution. They teach at the college here, then they jump in their car, they get on public transit and go over to teach at a university here, and then they go somewhere else, right? There's a story, I've been able to find this person, someone who teaches in Kingston, Toronto, Mississauga, like 5 different places in that eastern central Ontario area. We have our own here, though. This is somebody who's been teaching here for 17 years and had been a teacher for quite a few years before that at other institutions as an ESL teacher. She became a voice and speech teacher and drama teacher in the drama department here. She'd been doing it for 17 years when I got in her car one morning with her and we went to Cold Lake so she could teach.
Times where it's been really young. And you're trying to be with them, you're trying to work, you're trying to, their dad and I scraped together what little bit we could to provide them with something for their own education. So, somehow we managed to scrape together a little bit for that. There are definitely challenges. And because it's precarious, because you don't know whether it's what the next year brings, it can be a little harrowing. But as I said, it's not for the faint of heart. It's not. You have to be used to living with uncertainty. And if you're not, it's not really possible for you to do it for very long. And so I had a conversation with my sister, who's the head of a special needs department in a school in southern Alberta. And she just looked at me and said, there's no way that I could do what you're doing. She said, the not knowing will drive me crazy. And I hear that from a lot of people. Like, how do you? In fact, I think some people just don't believe it. They just go, well, you know that you're going to be working there. And when I say to them, I have been working there. classes. And so that can happen. And I'm, I don't take anything for granted. That it's always going to be there. So people really have a hard time imagining how that could be.
Yeah.
People in my own family.
So, I don't know, what do you get from that? Any questions or responses to that one?
How long do you drive?
3 hours.
Every day?
3 hours there, teach a 3-hour class, drive back for 3 hours.
Every day.
No, once a week. No, the other days she's teaching here. And she's teaching someplace downtown too.
And that's a dangerous highway.
It is dangerous.
Yeah. This was in March. I'm glad I didn't go with her in January. It would have been all dark. We wouldn't have been able to see her, just hear this voice. Anyway, so the freeway flyer syndrome, it creates a lot of problems. Primarily it's an issue of equality. This is a person who's been teaching for 17 years. She's tougher than the first person we showed. She deals with precarity all the time. She's an actress, right? But it is still an issue of equality. Frequently I find the people I interview have more formal qualifications than the continuing faculty in their departments. Often they have more experience in the areas that they're teaching in. The professionals often have a lot more experience in their professional fields. The artists often have a lot more recognition in their fields. They're not inferior in some way. They deserve to be treated like employees. They come back year after year. They pay into unemployment insurance. They pay CPP. They are given offices. As far as CRA is concerned, they're employees, right? But the university is trying to maintain a myth that they're not really employees. They're just there. They're just wealthy professionals, coming over for a hobby, right? Or something. Whatever BS whatever they make up, whatever they decide to justify. And sometimes they believe these myths because it used to be much more that way. The people who were contract teachers often were professional dentists or lawyers or engineers coming over on the side. But it hasn't been true for 20 years in most places. Now, institutions vary. So I'm generalizing a lot, and what I say may not be true of every department or every institution, right? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think my experience is being involved in talking with people in this community here is that the problem is that we aren't one thing. When I first got a contract here, exactly what I needed was a 4-month contract to get my feet back in while I was, being a parent of small children and this and that. And now my kids are in school, so I need a full-time position. And we have people, in some faculties, most of the precarious teachers are professionals who are doing this.
Yeah, we have a few.
But there's these people too.
But they get played up a lot, and really they're a small minority now. They're really a small minority. When we did surveys at University of Lethbridge on this even, and they're not a big university, the numbers that were professionals doing it on the side, weren't teaching in other institutions, etc., was a really small percentage, like 10, 15%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was, I remember earlier in my department, contract workers the rumor was they were the wives of faculty, right? And that they were doing this because they loved the work, but somehow they didn't really need a full-time job, and they had other tasks, domestic tasks to perform.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very I think that was a myth then, but it still perpetuates itself in some cases.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to note that you have 2 women there because these equity issues are really important in terms of who is doing these jobs.
Yeah, there are gender equity issues.
Yeah.
I believe that precarity is an equity issue, right? We have a rigid class system in our colleges and universities. There's an in-group and an out-group. It's an equity issue, right? And as it says here, it's one of the widest disparity gaps in any field. The gap between tenured faculty or even tenured track faculty and precarious contract faculty in terms of pay levels, benefits, etc., is enormous. It's not a small gap. It's a huge gap, right? And that gap needs to be closed, not by bringing anyone down, but by bringing up from the bottom, right? Nobody should ever accept being brought down, except perhaps our overpaid executives, right? It's ridiculous. You know this story, right? I mean, your president is paid 3 times as much as Justin Trudeau for running the country, right?
So, Gerry, I've been thinking about, I guess, some of the sort of an underlying problem, and until we address that, it's hard to make progress on the things I think that are important here. But I was just interested. I was just on my way over here, and I ran into a senior professor who I know reasonably well, and I just asked her how she's doing. I said, I thought you were retired. She said, yeah, I'm retired. She said, Jim, when I had to retire, I felt I had to retire because I just cannot stand the fact that we have no salary caps for these senior professors who are, I'll just sort of paraphrase it to the extent that it was quite disgusting to her. And I'm not necessarily saying I agree or disagree, but I'm on the administration side of things. I'm not budgetary. No, I don't. I'm with the technical group. I support computers and systems, so I don't get to see departmental budgets.
Right.
But when I hear the administrators of departments and faculties talk, they describe a budgetary structural deficit. Our costs are going up at one rate, and our income is going up at a smaller rate.
Yeah.
And as that grows, well, you can see it's not sustainable. And that's been happening for a long time. So what I'm, I guess, wondering is, until we, so you mentioned we would never want to, we want to see these more equitable, these cost differentials. We would never want to have somebody brought down, except for senior administrators. Well, we could look at the so-called...
Don't tell anybody I said that.
No, I won't. And I don't object.
Because we need them on site for a while at least.
Well, they do a difficult job, but my point is that on that so-called sunshine list, I looked at it the first year it was published, there's less than 10% is sort of people in the pure administration. That's what we call APO.
Lots of professors.
So these would be, I presume, senior academics who've reached those levels of deans, chairs, assistants, vice deans, and all these kinds of things. So I just wonder, well, because I don't think anybody would argue that your points are perfectly valid and we would want to see progress. I don't think anybody at any level of the institution would disagree. But when they say the money is the problem, or you said it's an argument, and I guess I think
People
it's
always say
reality.
that.
Yeah, so
They'll always say that. They've been saying it for 200 years. When we were trying to get down to beyond a 72-hour week, and children out of the factories, they said, "Oh, we can't afford it." They always say that. So, a budget is a planning document, right? It has a certain degree of flexibility, particularly in the public service area. Less so perhaps in a private, corporation or business. But education is a public good, I think, and we have to look at it that way. Now, less money is true, right? And I've interviewed a couple of administrators. I interviewed the provost of McEwen. I interviewed the dean at Boise, and they say they want us to have. There's more and more access. We have more and more students, more and more classes, right? But they're not giving us more money. Government is not supporting them more. They're chasing corporations. That's creating its own problems, right? So that is a real problem. Government underfunding is a definite problem. Second thing is administrative spending, right? Third thing is faculty, permanent faculty, continuing faculty, who are the minority, but there is a minority which are really preventing progress from happening. Some of the faculty associations in Alberta, AASUA has one of the best records. 2 other universities that I've taught at, their faculty associations do not have a good record in representing contract faculty needs. We're in McEwen, where I teach, they're the majority. But they continue to, do a terrible job of representing contract faculty needs. Terrible. There's a big fiasco this summer there, and there's a big meeting happening tomorrow, or a dissonant group of contract faculty are trying to get more representation within the faculty association, but it looks like it's going to be unsuccessful. We'll see how that works, because there are legal reasons, or always legalistic kinds of counter arguments. So it's a difficult situation. Anyway, it is. But the final thing is, it's not just permanent faculty or some of the more conservative faculty associations, but it's contract faculty themselves who are afraid, who are cynical, who are too busy, who are just apolitical, too conservative perhaps, to get involved. Because we have enormous strength when we work together. And we have even more strength when we work together as an entire university, particularly as an entire teaching group with permanent and contract faculty. Let's see if this will come up this time. I'm going to show you another clip. Coming up.
In this situation, are employed over and over and over again in the very same institution, continuing to be told how good you are, but never getting any stability. So there's a way in which it's demoralizing and undermines your sense that you're actually doing well. So I find that very difficult. And also at this stage of the game, now that I'm reaching the end of my working life, the reality or the realization that I will not have a pension, it's all a pittance compared to my fellow colleagues who have full-time jobs, who do the same, teach the same courses, have the same qualifications, and I've been running in parallel with them for almost 30 years, and their lives are going to be very different than mine at the end of our working lives. So that is also kind of demoralizing, and I understand the system, so I don't have any sense of any animosity, or I'm jealous of them, but I also feel as if somehow that diminishes my standing as a teacher.
Pam is a dancer. She's a leader of Contract Faculty Forward. That's the people who held up the banner that I was showing at the beginning of the presentation. Pam is hugely respected in the professional arts community. She's worked with Reverend Paz. She's danced all over the world. She is the leading contact improv teacher and organizer in Toronto. She's been doing it a long time. And she's about, as a dancer, she doesn't have many years left, right? And as a teacher, perhaps not so many years left, because she has to move as part of the way she teaches. And she has no pension, right? There's lots of people in that situation. After 27 years, I have no pension. I'm 67 years old, I have no pension except the regular government stuff that people get. I would go to faculty meetings at University of Lethbridge, and I would listen to them argue for half an hour about whether they would get invested in the best place for their pension plan. And I go, well, what about the rest of us? You just spent half an hour, you're not paying any attention to our needs and interests, but you spent half an hour just deciding whether to switch investment firms. Give me a break. Mind you, that faculty association did do some really good things too. They have faculty associations in general, particularly in Alberta, have kind of a mixed rating as far as I'm concerned. They do some really good things, and there's some great people within them. AASUA is a really particularly good one. Some of the others have some problems. But there's always lots of good people within them working hard. The team I was negotiating with at the University of Lethbridge, we're like bosom friends for life, right? Because we fought the good fight together and won some things. But pensions and our future seniors, and I guess one of the big questions is how to what degree are we complicit in the exploitation of labor of our colleagues? If we're not doing something. Anyway. Okay. Here's another one. This is moving on. This is not so much about the plight as the fight. So let's talk about how to work together and some of those other important things. This is JP, who leading the strike in Toronto right now. JP.
Do you think things will get better for contract faculty?
I think they have to. I think that the system depends on us banding together across this difference between full-time and contract faculty and working toward a system that actually privileges security over precarity. Basically, if this is allowed to continue unchecked, if we are, continuing not to privilege in this moment the working conditions of our precarious faculty, then we will all soon be precarious faculty, right? And it's that simple. At this point, it's a question of self-interest for a lot of full-time faculty, as well as one of moral and ethical good. Right? So even if you're not motivated by the sense of this is better for the collective good, this is better for education, to improve the working conditions, just out of pure self-interest now, you can look around and realize that this is a system built on 70% of the work at least being done by people who are underpaid with no security, but who are still doing the same job you are. The colleges are looking at that, the college administrators look at that, and they know if we can get it cheaper, why wouldn't we go this route?
And that's exactly it. That is the cusp, the crux of the issue. It is, if you can get it cheaper, why wouldn't you? And that's why I believe that teaching in stream jobs, which is a good step forward, that's one thing, but it's not going to solve the entire problem. Creating more permanent jobs, that's an important step, provided we look at the details of how that happens. Getting those new full-time jobs, or if you're getting some new jobs approved, or contract for it or something, who's going to get them? The person who's been teaching in your department for 10 years with a really good record? Or are you going to bring in some hotshot researcher who just did their PhD in this, somewhere else? You really got to, if you want the institution to be healthy and strong, you have to treat people the way we want our students to treat everyone in the world, right? It's a human rights issue on many levels. Okay, certainly an equity issue. Okay. And I'm not going to play this one for you yet because I'm going to skip ahead. Who is served by it? Oh yes, okay, this is some of the JP stuff. Precarity hurts everybody, I've already said that. Who's served? Who does it serve? On a short-term basis, it serves administrators, I guess, or it serves the budget balancers of the university, and maybe governments who don't want to put more money into universities and colleges. In the long run, though, it damages everybody, because it damages the quality of education, it damages morale within our institutions, that affects our students, that affects the world. Universities and colleges could be model employers. We brand ourselves as democratic, liberal institutions which believe in equity and equality. The reality is that's not what's going on right in our institutions. It's the elephant in the room. It may be invisible to some people, but it's there. And it's an enormous inequity. Okay, the strike issues that JP was talking about, or the strike issues that involve JP, the lady who was just speaking, are governance, academic freedom, and equity for precarious contract faculty. That's what those 12,000 people are out on strike for in Toronto right now. I'm not sure I agree with everything that they are planning for contract faculty, but they're after that interview was done, the numbers came in. They did a study, and 80% of the people teaching in colleges in Ontario now are contract faculty. 80%. One of their demands is that be moved down to 50% over a period of time. I'm not sure what the period of time would be. And the other side won't even talk about it. They won't even talk about it. That's why they're on the street. Okay, we have to work together. This is Andrea Calvert, who's also another amazing person. She teaches for CUFA, she doesn't teach, she works for OCUFA. It's the Ontario College, anyway, the University Faculty Associations Confederation, the Ontario Confederation or something of University College or University Faculty Associations in Ontario. She talks about solidarity and the corporate model here quite a bit, and she talks very eloquently about this.
When I was hired here at OCUFA, I was hired to start a new committee. And our committee is a bit of an unwieldy name, but we are the Contract Faculty and Faculty Complement Committee. And what our goal is to build solidarity between tenured faculty and contract faculty.
Sorry, I'm going to try and
The
start
reality
again,
is,
because it's
Yeah,
got a buffering problem.
yeah.
My computer is getting really full. Oops. Let's go back. My computer's not cooperating. Come on, baby. There we go. Let's give it a few seconds to buffer.
Sure. We can cut this part out.
Oops. Lost it again. Here we go. Okay. Let's see if this works now.
when I was hired here at OCUFA, I was hired to start a new committee.
Oh, well, we
And
just
our
listened to it.
committee is a bit of an unwieldy name, but we are the Contract Faculty and Faculty Complement Committee. And what our goal is to build solidarity between tenured faculty and contract faculty. The reality is, in a dog-eat-dog society like today, I can be in the retail sector and I can blame full-time workers for having their job, and they can blame me for not wanting to work evening shifts. We can all find ways to blame each other. The same is true with contract faculty and tenured faculty. There are a lot of myths, stories that we're told, things that we believe. Contract faculty might believe that tenured faculty have an easy life. Tenured faculty might look at contract faculty and say, you need more experience. The reality is we're seeing structural changes in our economy and our universities. And the explosion of part-time work helps the employers. It's what is allowing so many universities to go out and build new buildings and spend higher and higher amounts of money on executive salaries. They have this money because they've changed the instructional model on campus to a part-time, contingent, just-in-time faculty member. And so those savings that they accrue from the pensions, from the vacations, from the stability, from the good jobs, they cost faculty members, they cost students, but like all precarious and part-time jobs, it's a huge cost to our society because we have a whole number of people who aren't able to live middle-class lives anymore like they used to.
What's happening with continuing and permanent faculty?
So in the university world right now, we have two main problems. For tenured faculty and for continuing faculty, that problem is workload. Universities run on a notion of service, that these committees that people sit on and being advisors to students, this is the work of the university, it's how it runs. And the model is built on everyone doing service. But if only half of the people today are being paid to do service, they're doing 100% of the work of running a university with just 50% of the people. So for tenured and continuing faculty, workload is absolutely at the top of the list and a very, very serious issue. On the other hand, you have contract faculty being paid by the course. They're not paid to do any research. They're not paid to do any service. So they have low levels, they have inadequate wages, they have poor benefits, and they lack the attachment of feeling part of the university because they're not doing service. They're not out there meeting with their colleagues, assisting students. So those two problems are actually the same solution, and that is the hiring of more permanent faculty.
That's her solution. She's quite brilliant. Oops. But the question is, understanding it right. And maybe that segues, I know some of you have to go, but it segues us into the next section of talking a little bit about what can be done. I have other clips I could show you, but I think it's probably more important that we get a chance to talk.
So, are there any comments or questions? I had something I wanted to say when Jim was speaking earlier, but I thought I would just leave it till the end. But are there any questions? Yes, Margaret Ann.
Let me begin by saying I started my career as a contract person, and I know what it feels like.
You know what it feels like? Yeah. You know what it feels like? Yeah. Yeah.
But in all the work I've tried to do, it's always been saying, yes, I need to know all the problems, but then I need to say, what are the practical solutions? And I agree with Andrea. Hiring a whole lot more permanent faculty would be wonderful, but it's not going to happen because of all the excuses that we've heard given. And so if that's not going to happen right now, that doesn't mean that we don't do something else. We look at what are possible solutions. And one of the ones that I see happening a little bit, and I realize that science is just a little different from the arts. We have not tended to have nearly so many contract faculty because the full-time faculty is approved. But one of the things that we're seeing and talking about is having rolling contracts, so that there's a 3-year rolling contract which is renewed after every second year, so at least you get a year's warning. And of course it's not perfect by any manner of means, because I think it still doesn't include pension, although I think again, if you've been working for a certain number of years, then the pension does kick in. But looking at, it's so easy to say, looking at creative solutions, because just saying, I've come to the conclusion that hitting their head against a stone doesn't help very much. And so I look for the pillow, which might be there that I can bang up against. But that doesn't hurt, and sometimes it produces results. So that would be my sense of, we need to know all this, it's great. But can we end up saying, now, here, what thoughts do we have on how we change this situation? And change it not by asking for things that are not going to happen.
It's good point. I mean,
Kim?
Yeah, sorry, just sort of to talk to both of those, our new agreement, which you've looked at a little bit, the new agreement for we're called academic teaching staff now, but the sessionals, it has specific categories of contract from the traditional instructor for a 4-month session through rolling, over several years you're going to be teaching for these 8 months and off over the summer, up to what's called the career track, which is a full-time ongoing position. It's still contingent, so layoff can happen if they run out of money or that kind of thing, but it's actually better than what a full-time position in industry is, because you have to give 12 months notice. Like if you run out of money or lose the position, the person has 12 months notice. So that's something. The problem is there isn't any boot to press people into those more secure positions. So it's still possibilities rather than realities.
And if they can save money or remain more flexible by not appointing people to those positions, then they won't.
Right. So I mean, my ideal is we're always going to want teaching intensive positions for the sort of workload issues, but to make those positions as expensive as the continuing positions. Obviously, that's the problem that we can't fix now, but we can make it. The new framework. One of the goals was to make it more administratively costly to give someone a series of short-term contracts than to just give them an ongoing contract. I've been teaching for 4 years here in basically the same set of classes term after term, and I've only ever had 4-month contracts. If it was easier for them to give me an ongoing contract, the money would be coming from the same contingent pot of money. They'd still have the potential to get rid of me, 12 months from now if they finally can't pay me. But the admin, they wouldn't have to do a full new, effectively a whole new hire every 4 months.
It's enormously inefficient. Precarious is enormously inefficient.
Yeah. So I think that there's that administrative incentive that we can put in without throwing a lot of money, which solves the precariousness. And then, keep pushing, eventually, sooner or later, there's going to be a little bit more money that we can throw at it and just incrementally make it more equivalent. Because you're right, we can't, it wouldn't be appropriate to say, all right, you folks who are doing really well, you've gone through 50 years or however many years of tenure stream on the which isn't paid great at the beginning, on the promise that you'll get these insane salaries at the end, to say, actually, never mind, you're not getting that anymore. That wouldn't be appropriate either, right? So it's just a matter of, we have things that are not expensive, we can do now to solve part of the problem. And you're right, we're lucky here because we have started to solve that already with our latest.
There are some things where you're not doing so well. In job security area, you've made some steps in the direction of some different kinds of appointments, which is very good. But you don't have any kind of seniority system here. And
I think there is seniority built into those teaching positions, though. That's
the new ones?
Yes,
there is a right of first right of recruiter.
Yes, there is seniority based. That's what those teaching positions are.
And you want to look at the language in those because they weren't good when I was here. And even when I talked to Brigade a couple of years ago when I was negotiating with her, she said the language is what they call weasel language, right?
Yes.
There's too many outs.
No, there is a new teaching stream contract position that was just negotiated last spring that is intended to take up some of those issues, and there are seniority issues there, etc.
But the rest of us need it.
Yes, no, and that is, that's one of the good things I think that the AASUA has negotiated. One of the issues, though, is that I know that they wanted to do something like more conversion style appointments, right? And that's not part of it. So you still end up with a sense that somehow people in teaching intensive positions don't need any time to do research, which seems ridiculous to me. If you're doing high-level courses, high-level teaching, you're not given any compensation for your research. And that seems entirely inequitable and also kind of anti-intellectual, like a strange thing for a university to do. To not reward people for doing the research required to do high-level teaching. The other thing I wanted to mention was just when Jim was talking about high salaries being responsible for the inequity. I do think that there are obviously outliers in terms of very high salaries for some faculty, but that is not the case for all faculty. And there is also a tremendous differential among faculty that we found when AASUA did our salary equity review. Just looking into the factors that are involved and looking at, Paige Lacey did a very good analysis of the PhD faculty positions in medicine, where she found there was really very little equivalence between equity and excellence. There's always a notion somehow that you can't hire for equity because it's maybe not excellent. Well, in fact, when she did this fabulous analysis, she found that there was no necessary correlation. So I do think that these inequity issues percolate up and down the scale into tenured faculty, and ideally, what you would want to have would be positions for all people who are involved in the university that allow them to do research. They're compensated for that work as well as their teaching.
Sorry, I was actually, I wanted to go back to a point Jazz made earlier. I'm not sure if your film will speak to this, but what's the demographic of the individual who are in these positions? I'm curious as to whether you've seen that it tends to be more women, it tends to be more minority kids. And is there a correlation between precarious positions and belonging to some of these marginalized groups, which I suspect there probably would be.
In Ontario, 66% are women. We know that. I'm not sure. Most of the researchers say that they believe that there's a disproportionate number of the people in contract faculty positions as opposed to continuing positions are from visible minorities of some kind. But I'm not sure that the research is very conclusive on that. They did a study in Nova Scotia, and they found that in Nova Scotia there's equal numbers of women and men, but they didn't look into issues of other equity issues regarding cultural background or racializing issues and those kinds of things. Gender issues, they didn't find one in particular in Nova Scotia, but Ontario certainly did.
Just on that note, I know the CAUT has advisories, like here's the ideals you should shoot for. And one of the things they say is we need to get transparency and information from, you know about this too, Janice, information from the university specifically so we can advocate for our members on the basis of equity and other things.
Right.
Because without the information, we can't do what our members need us to do on that.
That's right, and the Equity Committee, that's one of the things we're really pushing for in terms of bargaining, is bargaining for a new contract that makes it essential that the university administration share data about their employees so we can actually come to understand meaningfully what these relationships are. We don't even know. We don't have any information about salary, for instance. That we did our AASUA salary study on the basis of the Sunshine List, which was incomplete and only for people who made over $125,000 a year, which left out a huge population. But that's a really key issue that we need to have that information so we can properly understand the urgency of some of these issues.
One of the very big difficulties in that, and it's been mentioned, like a tremendous number of different categories of people being labelled with different labels.
Yes.
And maybe doing very similar things, but it's very difficult to recognise that unless you have a job description for every individual one.
That's right. Well, yeah, and most pay equity processes include that kind of, equal pay for work of equal value. So that kind of comparator system is necessary to do that too.
Yeah, the studies are difficult to do, but they're possible to do. We're supposed to be smart in university. We can figure out how to do that stuff.
Well, they're not difficult. We just need the information. Lots of universities do it. We just don't have the data.
Lots of them withhold it too deliberately. There's books written about that. I interviewed someone who wrote a book called Academia Inc. Jamie, what's his last name? Anyway, Jamie in Ontario. Academia Inc., corporatization of universities, and he has 2 chapters on how difficult it was for him to get information. He had to use access to information law that was relatively recent and quote it back to the universities in order to get information from them on what's going on in their universities. And he got 2 calls from presidents of universities trying to warn him off getting this information and asking him what he wanted it for, etc. He was working on his PhD thesis in sociology at Carleton at the time. And so he wrote that into the book that he published out of this thesis. Getting information is key. And writing it into contracts is key. Like what you need to know and when you need to know it and what form it's going to come in. You bargain for it, put it in the contract. There's no reason they can't give you that kind of information. Yeah.
Has there been now my brain's not working, where you request private access to information to people late? Has that been done anything?
That's all provincial law. So I don't know. And that's theoretically a last resort.
I don't know anything about that.
In principle,
you ask for it first before you start pulling up quoting the laws, but you bargain for it.
Yeah, as there's certain information that shouldn't be publicly available, but should be available to the bargaining agent for the employee. So I think that, and I don't know what level that is now, but I think AASUA has been making those requests, strongly worded as we need this information to represent our members. under the legislative framework, like this is our job, this is what we need.
Yeah, like how much people are being paid if they're not on the sunshine, this might be confidential material, but you should be able to get access to, averages, those kinds of things. I worked in theater still work in theater, but I've worked in theater for many, many years, and every time we signed a contract with an actor or a designer or something, we had to file a copy of that contract saying exactly how much that person was being paid, what benefits they were getting with the association. So the association had a record of everything, and they could simply plug it into their computers and come up with the averages, etc. So there's no reason the university can't give you that information. But they make it difficult. When I was bargaining at the University of Lethbridge, I said, well, how many sessionals are we? We're not sure. I said, well, why aren't you sure? Oh, the university won't give us that information. Oh, why won't they? Oh, they said it's too difficult to gather. Give me a break. They can gather it if they want to. And if they don't, you put it in the contract and make them. You grieve it if they don't.
Yeah, I mean, that is the useful thing about having it in the contract, is then you can grieve it, right? There are, as I said, there are universities, like even when you look at pay equity issues, like University of Toronto, the University of British Columbia, and other universities already have on their website data that is public, and studies of salary equity that are public, right? So it is one that is not, it has nothing to do with whether it's easy or difficult to do, but it has to do with whether people actually are interested in understanding, in having the public understand what's going on in the university. And the fact that we haven't done any pay equity or salary equities equalization ever, when in some universities they're doing their second and third go at it, suggests that we are really behind the times.
These issues are all interrelated.
They are interrelated.
They're all intersectional, whatever you call it.
One thing that you mentioned stats for different places. I was paging through all my notes from our meetings, and at one meeting someone mentioned that, I think it was Brigitte mentioned that 40% of the teaching academics at the university here are contract academics. I think this is 2015. And 49% of the courses taught were taught by contract academics.
I knew the figures were pretty close to half.
Yeah.
Because I talked to Brigitte on the phone a couple of years ago, actually, when I was negotiating. We were trying to find out, because Lethbridge has a much lower number. So they were saying, guys will say, we're not explaining a lot of them. Those guys at U of A are doing it. We're not doing it. The problem is structural and systemic. It's not. It doesn't matter. There's little differences in our contracts with our designations, etc. Somehow we've accepted a two-tiered system, and it's what the postal workers are fighting against. You bargain with a group of old-timers who control the unions or associations, and you say, we'll take care of you guys. However, the new hires, etc., we're going to save some money on. Deal? And they make the deal. Sometimes it's not even a devil's bargain like that. You don't even know it's happening. In fact, I don't know how aware people are within faculty associations of the extent of the exploitation, the extent of casualization of jobs that has happened in Canada. But it somehow has been allowed to happen. Somebody's been asleep at the wheel at the faculty associations in terms of really watching that and stopping it. And there are many things to do. There are many solutions that are worth looking at. I want to recommend doing research, though. Faculty associations I worked with, nobody was doing the research. Nobody was finding out what was going on at the universities. No one was looking for the best practices elsewhere. Or they say, we don't have time to it, I'm too busy teaching. Or, we only have a small, staff here, they can't do that. So we need to professionalize that process a lot more, and we need to become a lot more aware of what other people are doing. There are some interesting models in Quebec, at York, for instance, in Toronto, in BC, the FIPC members, some of the smaller universities and colleges in BC have a very interesting contract that erases most of the gaps so that there's no structural economic advantage for the administration to casualize more jobs. So if you, at Vancouver Community College and at Vancouver Island University, if you come in for a couple of weeks and substitute, you get a pro rata version of the pension. You get pro rata benefits. You get all of those things. So there's no advantage to the administration to fragmentize and casualize those jobs. As soon as you have a gap, you're creating an economic incentive for those in administration to hire more people at the bottom level. As soon as you have a severe two-tier system, it doesn't mean you can't have some differences. Increments for experience are really important. Perhaps higher pay levels if you've got a PhD or equivalent, MA, the system they have, or a master's. Those may be important differences. Although, as an artist, I recommend you look really hard at equivalencies, right? Because, or in accounting or many other areas. You might have someone who does not have an advanced degree in accounting, but has been doing it on a high level for many, many years, right? And the same is true of artists. So you have to really look hard at equivalencies. So there can be small differences, but when there's this huge gap, that's the problem, because the administration will feel pressure to take advantage of it. And in a way, they're just doing their job, because their job is to do the most they can with the least amount of money, often. So you have to solve the structural inequities somehow. And you have to be sure that when you create new positions and you create changes, you're not accidentally incentivizing some negative behavior on the part of administration. It's very easy to do that. And when I talk with my colleagues about even people in negotiation for faculty associations, etc., they're naive about those things. They don't really, they're not so good at strategic thinking, some of them. And they do stupid things.
No, I remember that when I was in Scotland, there was a rule. It was meant to help regularize people. If you've been on contracts for 5 years, you're automatically regularized.
Right.
Makes great sense until the administration thinks, okay, well, you're at 4.5 years. We're going to let you go for whatever the cool-off period is, and then we'll hire you back. So it reduced the employment rather than increasing the...
Yeah, you have to be really careful about how you do those things. And there have been some terrible things done to help sessionals. And I was at University of Lethbridge when we came into the faculty association there. Sessionals became part of it. The first thing they did was negotiate with the university a deal that said that sessionals can only teach 1 course per term. I wrote to them and I said, well, why did you do that? They said, it was to help you. It was to help me. How's that going to help me? I've been teaching 5 or 6 courses a year for several years. And there's a lot of other of my colleagues who are in the same situation. Well, it helps you because it forces them to move you up to a term position, which costs more. It's a higher salary level, and it's a 1 or 2 year guarantee, right? It's like one of these rolling term or other positions. I said, well, why wouldn't they just hire another sessional? If they take away my 6 courses, they can hire 5 other sessionals to do it, right? Oh, well, that would happen. And it did happen. Fortunately, it didn't happen as badly as we thought it might, because the University of Lethbridge is such a small community. There's not a lot of people around with academic credentials. But it did happen. They're in the weird position of having only 10%, when I was negotiating, of their faculty were contract faculty. As far as we could determine, we couldn't get very good numbers. But 20% of the course, 10% of the courses were taught by contract faculty. 20% of the membership was contract faculty. So what they've done is they have twice as many people as they had before, right? At least. So they're not really solving the problem. Some other universities have used percentages and said, overall percentage, you cannot go beyond this. Like if you've got 40% of the people teaching here, 49% of the courses, you could negotiate and say no more than 52% can be contract faculty. So the numbers just don't keep going up, because they will keep going up if there's an economic incentive to do it, right? So you've got to stop it. Give them a little wiggle room, give them a couple more percentage, but stop it. And when you convert when you create these longer term positions, make sure that the people who are in those positions, convert them as much as possible rather than make them compete for them. Because If they're good enough to have been doing the job for 10 years, they're employees already. De facto employees. So give them that honor. My God, you know? And they don't. And we see this happening. You know, I've interviewed several people who have worked in departments for years and years and years, and these are people who have excellent teaching records and often excellent research records, but they're taken for granted. They've been around. So the permanent job comes up in their department. They don't even get interviewed. This happens to quite a few people. So the grass is always greener, right? You know, there's a terrible sexist expression that our mothers used to tell our daughters, if they can get the milk for free, why buy the cow, right? It's horrible, but that is what is happening to so many sessionals, right? You create these full-time jobs or new jobs if you can get the money to do it. Yeah, and I don't agree that it's set in stone. I think that governments can be pressured. That's why I'm making this film. I think the public needs to know what's going on, and I think eventually there will be some public pressure. Generally, people in the surveys in universities in Ontario certainly, the vast majority of people want their universities and colleges to be ideal employers, to be good employers. They want a good atmosphere there. They believe in public education. So there's a lot of public support. We have to galvanize it around this somewhat invisible issue. Sorry, that's what I read.
Thank you.
Can I just throw in a couple of things that come to mind? One is that we're talking about the way universities are presently structured.
Yeah.
And we're hearing a lot about this way of doing things. We disagree quite quickly. If we go to blended classrooms and flipped classrooms and MOOCs and all the other things that are going on. And so I think it's always good to maybe take that into account as something which may affect things fairly dramatically as the whole university system. The other thing that comes to mind, and I recognize that particularly, we're a research-intensive university. We're not going to be able to cut back on our research faculty because then we're going to lose out on research. And our whole reputation from an awful lot of things, unfortunately, is so based on research. I think it's getting a little better that we're recognizing that we're also a university as well as a research university, and so we're more concerned about our students. But that argument, of course, is not as strong for colleges or less intensive research universities. It was hearing you say that the number of contract faculty is always going to rise, and I think maybe there are arguments which would suggest that won't necessarily happen at large research universities, because there's another side to this whole story, that we're totally dependent on people doing research.
Well, I hope you're right. I hope you're right. I would say, though, that the evidence is pretty strong that it is growing here. I mean, if it's already at 40 or 49%, that's a lot more than it was when I was a grad student.
In my department, it's more than 50%. It's quite for the first year last year.
English departments are notoriously the worst departments.
Well, I don't know whether we're the worst, but we do a lot of service teaching. And the service teaching is sort of means that we teach beyond the means really of our tenured faculty and at the best of times. So, but I was shocked when I heard it was more than 50%. One thing I did want to say was that I find it really interesting that this issue is surfacing now, and you're making this film, which is fantastic. But that when I was a union steward, and it was in the 80s, for a graduate student union that also had contract faculty, we were talking about conversion appointments. And at that point they did, soon after that, they did negotiate, the union did negotiate conversion appointments for contract faculty. They were competitive and they're not perfect, but that was like 25 years ago or maybe even longer. And so this, there are models.
York still has some.
Yeah, there are models for how to actually shift things, right? Now, I know that I've spoken with the people who do equity with the unions at York and other places, and they've tried to do, they've been working on developing equity studies for contract faculty, with people, contract faculty members writing out workload schedules and that sort of thing, so you actually can kind of get a sense of what kind of work that people do, so you can do those sort of comparative studies. So that seems like a good progress, but there isn't really enough of them. And I just feel like the history of this has been very scattershot and long in coming to many places. And there's a sort of amnesia about what has happened 25 years ago that could have happened everywhere. There's no reason it couldn't have happened elsewhere.
We need more good studies that you're doing that actually get around what's happening currently, what's been happening in the past, what are the issues. We really need those. And we need good information and surveys. There is, a little bit more being done finally, but whether it will be acted upon, whether it will be remembered in future years, who knows, right? Your faculty association, I'm wondering how much history it keeps, so that if one set of bargaining things are, some things are negotiated for, some things are won, some things are lost, some things are set aside. Do you go back and look at what has been gained and lost and put on the side in the past, so that you can pick up, so that your institution has some institutional memory.
Yeah,
one of the problems with precarious is that universities are losing institutional memory because people are coming and going so much, and it's precarious. And that's very bad for the quality of the institution, as well as society in general.
I think there is a memory of these things here, and I think the teaching stream positions that came out were trying to respond to long-term injustices, but I also think that they're partial and inadequate, because they don't deal with some of the fundamental issues about what it means to be a university teacher / researcher at a high level, right? And so, but it's I think people were negotiating that in good faith and felt it was some progress anyway.
One of the things I also am starting to really see is that we have so much in common with other workers, right? We separate ourselves all the time in various ways, right? Universities are very hierarchical places. There's levels of prestige and status. And sometimes we have to never let go of our goal for excellence. Never. But really stop attributing it to the person and start attributing it to the work that's done, so that people won't cling to their positions so desperately. Even at McEwen, things come up like some of the arguments within the Faculty Association, people saying, oh, we're not a union, we're an association, as if this is somehow better. We're not a college, we're a university now, so this is somehow better, right? Let go of some of that stuff, please. We're in the same position as people who work at Walmart, many of us, right? We are all workers, right? Unless we're in administration somewhere. And that, anyway, pet peeve, but something that we could gain so much from. We can learn so much from what unions are doing. We can learn so much from what other groups are doing. And we can share it and benefit from it. And in the end, it will benefit everyone. Even the administrations don't really benefit from this system. Not long term.
I think that's one of the things that this film can certainly help with. The public, I think, sees us as very privileged. It doesn't matter that we're all on together, whether we have that privilege or not. And so to show that universities are not the idealized places that perhaps the public thinks they are.
Yeah. I love universities and I love teaching, but there's so many things we could work on. We need to work on it hard. And if we don't, it's been way too long, right? This problem has been taking too long. There have been people writing books about it, 30, 40 years ago. And situations like Janet's talking about, what was going on at York 25 or 30 years ago. No, we're not making as much progress as we should on it. And it is, CBC's documentary on Ira Bazin's radio documentary is called Canadian University's Dirty Little Secret. Right?
It's not the only issue that's very, very slow and changing.
What?
It's not the only issue that's very slow and changing.
Yeah. When I was in negotiation at University of Lethbridge, when I was flying down there, I was listening to a Joe Plaskett song called It's Taking Too Long to Get Better. And I thought, I want to just walk into the room and play this for them. Because it is taking too long.
Well, on that note, I think I'll just thank you very much, Gerry, for your presentation and wish you much good fortune in your film. I'm really looking forward to it, as we all are, I'm sure. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for inviting me to come.
Thank you.
Great conversation and great chance for me to organize my material a bit.
When will the film be done?
When will it be done?
In like